connected to basic soul, but it's taking time to. Why? What's wrong with it? At the moment it's working. It says connected, secured properties. It says. Oh, I just see if there's anybody even on. Okay. Okay. It's working. Oh, so it's up.
Someone done?
No, it was. It's. Right. We're up to Daf Pei Amud Aleph, about 6 lines from the top. Big mazel tov to Shiur for our baby sister. I wish you a lot of nachas. I shouldn't disturb you too much. Rashi says, at the end of Vayishlach, that Yaakov asked his sons to help him. Rashi says, Echov. So Rashi says that a son is like a brother to a father because he can help a father. So like you're helping to bring up the child. So like your brother says, also chilek in the Maharal talks about it. No, we could take her, play with her, read her stories. Okay. The Gemara mentions that there are 2 places in the Torah where the Torah uses a different language and Chazal made a different measure. The 2 places are Tumas Oichlin, where the Torah says, what's the lashon of the Torah? And Chazal changed it from the normal shiur, which is the kazayas, and they made it for the shiur of kibetza. Another place is in Yom Kippur, where the Torah uses the words Ashaloi Se'una, and Chazal changed it from a kazayas to a kiseves. You should just be aware that there's a huge machlekes Rashi and Tosfos in about at least 5 or 6 places in Shas. When the Chazal said that Tumas Oichin is kibetza, we mentioned the example yesterday. You've got a dead person, a loaf of bread in the house. The loaf of bread became tummy. And the question is, I take a crumb of it, do I become tummy? And the chiddush is that it's not. That is Rashi's explanation. Tosfos says, not only does not spread tumah, but it doesn't even catch tumah. According to Tosfos, something less than the kibetza can't even become tummy. Rashi says it can become tummy. It can't spread tumah. So the example that I gave, a loaf of bread, let's say you've got a crumb in somebody's house, and another come in another person's house, and another come in another person's house, and they're all dead. So according to Rashi, the tumah is caught, and then afterwards, if you put them all together, you can get a kibetza of tumah. According to Rashi, spreading tumah requires a kibetza. According to Tosfos, even catching tumah requires a kibetza. And Mashik that Tosfos Son and Yom Kippur, that teaches us that concept. Now the Gemara goes in to the halachas tumas oichlin. Where do we see from the words Mikol ma'achal ashiyochel oishi? Where do you see the words Mikol ma'achal ashiyochel as kabetza? What's the connection? That means, let me ask a different way. The Torah says Ashli, and that tells you a kiseves. Yeah, but where do you see the word Ashli Sunnah B'Tzal? What? I know, but where do you see? We mentioned yesterday, I'm going to mention again and again today, that once a person's eaten a kiseves, he's not afflicted, right? Come home. And Kolamo, in Eicha, there's a whole passage describing the terrible hunger of Klal Yisrael, the Churban, tremendous hunger. Someone once told me, a Holocaust survivor, so it is, he said they should, grandchildren sometimes come home and say, I'm starving. And then they've eaten breakfast, they've eaten lunch, they've had a couple of snacks, but they come home starving. And he said, they don't really know what it means to starve. Okay, they should never know. The Maisa, the point is, that the Pasuk says, Ashalu Su'una, that's not afflicted. And once a person's eaten the kiseves, is not afflicted. So if somebody would say to you, how do you know it's not the kazayis? Because the Torah says, Ashalu Su'una, the Su'una has got to do the kiseves. But how do we see if you call ma'achal asheyochel a kabetza? That's more insight. Says the Gemara like this. Tumas oichlin is the 3rd word of the 7th line down. Tumas oichlin the kabetza v'nolan, how do we know? Food that is eaten, which we said is spare. Food that comes from food. Where do you ever have food coming from food? Very good. A chicken's egg. So therefore, the Torah says any food that comes from food, the only place we have such a thing is a chicken's egg. So from there, and that pasuk is talking about tumah. There, the pasuk says clearly the word tumah. Yitmo shall become tummy. So only something the size of a chicken's egg can become tummy because it's the only thing that's food that comes from food. The Gemara. Again, there's a pizza, it's an egg of a chicken. Oh, that's the more after in a minute. Maybe a goat which is born from a mother. And if that would be the case, food that comes from food, what would the size be to get tumah? That'd be huge, the size of a goat, which is a lot more than the kibetza. It says, well, no, the chus shchita, it's not food that comes from food, because as it is, you can't eat it, and therefore it's not food that comes from food, you still need to shecht it. There's a special halacha if you shecht a mother, you find a baby inside, you do not need to shecht it, you can eat it as is. So that is called ben pekor. It says, well, ton kvir, you still need to do kvir, that to take out the blood. You can't eat it completely as it is, you have to get rid of the blood. Says the Gemara, you said that a food from a food may be an ostrich or an egg coming from a very, very big bird, and then much, much bigger. It says, what's faster, but to faster. Here, the Torah is telling you that only to become tomei, it's not enough to be a kazai, so it has to be the size of food that comes from a food. You can't go to a higher measure. You've got to go to the basic measure you've got. More to faster. You can't grab more than you want. Because over here, we really want to grab the biggest shiur. Why do we want to grab the biggest shiur? Because by grabbing the biggest shiur, we're going to have much less tumah. It's more cooler. Maybe the egg of a bird, which is tiny, like a dove or pigeon, a tiny, tiny egg. And that is food that comes from a food. So now we're back to square one. That where do we know that tumas oichlim is bekabetza? We suggest if food comes from food, we suggest all kinds of suggestions, we push them all away, but this one we can manage. Answer the Gemara, a new answer, a completely different answer. Food they could eat it in one go. You can't swallow, you can't put in the back of your mouth more than a beis of a tiny goyles. Because food that can be eaten. So we had two explanations how you can eat food that comes from food. We will push that away because then you could come to a tiny bird. Food that can be eaten in one go. How much can you swallow in one go? Anybody want to guess? No user is to argue with the Chazon Ish. Each one brings many, many proofs. This is one of the questions of the Chazon Ish. If you were to put a chicken's egg and try and swallow it down, I can almost guarantee that none of you will be able to swallow it down. Don't try it. Which is a right to know that the eggs are not, and that the Chazon Ish, the eggs are only half the size of the real egg, meaning that really the egg is twice the size. You try and get an egg double the size, it won't even get into your mouth. So you can say that, squish it to the, change the shape a little bit, maybe get it in. But that's one of the questions. Okay. Personally, it's chilev in these nowadays. He has to write a shiur how much he ate. Maybe Beis will come and Mabishum. That means there's a special halacha if a person does an avera. And what he has to do, he has to write down that when Mashiach comes, I'll bring a chatos. Anybody knows? We had it on Shabbos, second parak of Belezer, that he once was learning on Shabbos and he tilted the candle and he wrote down that when Mashiach comes, I'm going to bring a beautiful chatos as a korban, chatos shmeinat Beis Hamikdash. So what happens is you have to write it down. Now that's obvious, you have to write it down. Here the Gemara adds another aspect. It's not enough to write down. You have to write down how much you ate. Right? Chas v'shalom, let's say you go home, you eat a piece of meat. Now it has to be chilev, non-kosher meat is not chilev, because only, let's say you can eat you got a piece of chilev, it's from the back parts of the animal. You have to write down how much you ate. Why? Because maybe Beis when Mashiach comes, will tell you a measure which is not the same as today. So therefore you have to write down that I have to be a chatos, and plus the measure that the person ate. So Mona tries to analyze this a little bit. We will discuss it. The Gemara discussed it. What does that mean? Maybe what will happen is Mashiach will come and they'll say that you're chayv for a tiny kazais, and therefore you don't know. You think that you're not chayv, and it comes out that you're chayv because it's a very small kazais. Well, Tanya, that means according to this, we would talk about somebody that thinks to himself, really, I don't need to bring a korban because I owe such a small amount. Nevertheless, we tell him, write it down because you never know, maybe a later base will come with a smaller ship. Well, Tanya, the Pasuk says that somebody made a mistake and he did an Avera, he sinned. More dashes again and again for the same drasha. That we're discussing like this, somebody who did something, where when he found out that it was wrong, he regretted it. But if we have somebody that by finding it out would not regret it, that means we would say to him, you should know that it's chaydav, and he would still continue to eat it. Such a person does not bring a korban chatos. It does not bring a korban chatos. Right? You can't bring a korban chatos if a person by mistake it's chaydav, where if you would have found out it's chaydav. Now this person, let's say, he thinks the kazais is 20 gram, 25 gram, which is, let's say nowadays, the right share is 25 gram. They have children say to you, did they eat a kazais? They say that the way to measure it is it's what you can fit into a matchbox, a small matchbox, quite small. 2 jack and 2 biscuits, the same as really kazais. That is the share of chaydav. Now what happens is, the person ate, and he thinks to himself, well, it was only 1 jack and 2 biscuits equivalent, therefore I don't need to bring. So we say, write it down, because maybe Beis will come along. The problem is, if Beis would have come along and tell us a smaller share, but he would not have regretted it. Because at that time, had you told him it's chaylev, he would have continued to eat it. Why? Because he would have thought to himself that it's okay because it's less than a share. Now you're going to ask, or you should ask, but he still wouldn't have eaten it because he wanted to chatzi share some nateh or midu abanom. But the answer is that there has to be something that is considered a chatos in the sense that all he's missing is that one piece of information is that it's a chatos. If he, for example, doesn't realize the severity, for example, the Chaznish writes this, that all the people of Chalal Shabbos nowadays, when Mashiach comes, when they have to bring a chatos for every time of Chalal Shabbos, the answer is no. Why not? Because they would not regret it, meaning they do not understand the severity of what they're doing. They're not aware of what they're doing. It's not considered to be, person has to know, missing the one piece of information, that would change it. Over here, this particular person is actually missing 2 pieces of information. One is he doesn't know that it's chayr, be ate by mistake. But another is that he thinks the share is that much, and basically tell him the share is less. So therefore, he can't be chatos anyway. Let's see the words inside. Somebody where he would tell him the information, would straight away do tshuva, would stop, maybe call him. Maybe call on the contrary, that maybe Beis will come to a big kazais, and therefore he won't realize. Therefore, if a person eats chaylev, should write down the amount he ate. The Beis should to tell him. Says, well, why did we use the expression yav b'shur? Yav b'shur means to make the shur bigger. And it says more, maybe the Sanhedrin, when Mashiach comes, will increase the korbanos because of the smaller shiurim. Okay. The measurements for all the different things, and the oinshin is aloch l'moshe misinai. It says, well, oinshin nechtav ksivi, the Torah writes. One place it says Malkus, one place it says Misa, it says aloch l'moshe misinai. Elochi kama shiurin shel oinshin aloch l'moshe misinai. It's aloch l'moshe misinai. The measurements get punishment. Radha Machrik is right at the beginning of this perk of Chatzishir Osim Na'ater or not. Does anybody remember who were the 2 people arguing? It was Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Does anybody remember what your opinion of Yochanan holds? He holds Chatzishir is Osim Na'ater, and that's how we pass him. So it comes out very, very nicely, the words of Rabbi Yochanan. Shiurin shel oinshin is haloch l'moshe misinai. Meaning like this. All measurements, all Osim in Hatorah. But the measurements for which one needs to get the punishment, that is written as halacha l'mishmah, because even a lower measurement is already awesome. Min haTorah. The shiurim that the Torah should give you a punishment, that's halacha l'mishmah. Tani nami achi shiurim shleich halacha l'mishmah. Achem oimim beisinu shel Yavitz tiknu. Yavitz was on the second name, we also know him as a Snil ben Kanaz. Says the Gemara, "V'ksiv el hamitzvah shenovi v'shay lechadesh dava me'ato." and Navi is never allowed to come up with a new halacha. The Shokhu Mechozu v'Yosem Esnub and Kanaz re-established them. That means he was able to work them out from new droshes, and he able to come to it, and not that he came up with a new halacha. That's not possible. Okay. So on Yom Kippur, if a person Chas V'Shalom eats a kriseves, big date, which is how much, by the way? Anybody remember the Shiur of a kriseves? Just a bit less than a kibetza. Or he drinks a mole lugmov, a mouthful of drink, is chayev kos. What happens if he eats half of food and half water? Is he chayev kos? Anybody know? No. How do you know? That is the Mishnah. Mishnah says that it comes with star of food and drink. What happens if he eats two different kinds of food? That's an apple and orange. It is with stuff. We said even if the two don't clash in taste. Right. So Asher Simole Lugmov. Omar Vidomah Shmol Leimole Lugmov Mamish doesn't mean both cheekfuls, plural. And if you would fill one cheek, it will look like both cheeks are full. Most of the Shem explain that if you fill enough water to fill up one cheek, then one person standing on the side of you thinks that you're drinking two cheekfuls, and therefore this is a chumrah that even if you have one cheekful, that's enough to be chayev kos. It says mole lugmov, which means two cheeks. By the way, we pass him like this, and this makes an afkemina. And the Shavur brings. I mentioned this once before. Making a brocha achroina on wine, right? A geffen on wine. Says the Mishnah V'or that many hold money look. And how much is it off the top? Says the Mishnah V'or, therefore, I told you once, I was once like somebody I was always makbid to drink the entire becher for Abdullah. I found it difficult. Once I was somebody in his house, and he drank maybe half a cup. He made that a geffen. So how can you do such a thing? So he says because he's relying on two different shittas. He's relying on the Chaim Noah that holds that to be Beis is only half of the Chaz, or 86. And if you don't like the Chaim Noah, you've got the Mishnah V'or that says that Mole Lugbov is enough to make a geffen for, and the Mole Lugbov is only one shik, even less. Even the Kuz Chaznish Mole Lugbov is not as much as the whole becher. So if with the two together, I make a geffen. And every so often, not always, most weeks I try to finish the entire becher and sell a geffen. Some weeks I find it very difficult because I drink wine. As I told you, the Rashi wrote, we did brachas, Rashi writes, you should use wine for $5 as well, for everything. And therefore, some weeks I don't drink the whole thing, but I still sell a geffen, even if I don't drink the whole thing. I only drink 2/3, I sell a geffen. Okay. What? By Kiddush is much easier. Kiddush is much easier. By Kiddush, Kiddush also have wine. But by Kiddush, everybody's masking that Bali Lugmov is enough. And not only is Bali Lugmov enough by Kiddush, many persons can hold that you can add all what your children or wife drink as well. So certainly, Kiddush, you don't need to drink so much. Right? Kiddush, I drink about 1/3 of the Becha, and I'm satisfied with that. You don't need to drink more. Word case is only by Seder night. Yeah, there's no question about Seder given. You don't need to drink word case by Kiddush.
So if your child finished
Yeah.
Havdalah as well?
By Havdalah, it's not so straightforward. You can't be mitzvah if your child Havdalah. You can't. It doesn't help you. Okay, we'll get to go. Oh, good. Okay, so Rabbi Papa came, or Yehuda came with a big chiddush, a big chumrah for Yom Kippur. That if you just drink one mouthful, one big cheekful, that's enough. Meisvei. Kama yishta v'yechal v'shama oimim v'vis v'sil oimim mole lugmov. One cheekful, two cheekfuls. Rabbi Yehuda v'shema v'loza kem mole lugmov. That which looks like mole lugmov. Yehuda v'shema could take a meal like a sip. So we see clearly. More says that it's mashma mole lugmov. It's both cheekfuls. It says, "Well, me adifim imas nisin." Is this any worse than our Mishnah? The kimna that we said kedei Shiur, that it looks like mole lugmov. Also, achanami kedei Shiur. More that can't be. In our Mishnah, when we said mole lugmov, we said it looks like mole lugmov. One cheekful. But over here, you can't say that. Why can't you say that over here? Because if that's the case, why is there 4 opinions? The first opinion was with this, mole lugmov, kem mole lugmov, and a gemir, which is a sip. Now that doesn't work, because if you say that mole lugmov is kem mole lugmov, then that's exactly the same thing. That is like this. According to Beis Hillel, it has to be a big cheekful. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's enough a small cheekful. So it comes out that according, we pass like always, we pass like Beis Hillel. So how much do you have to drink on Yom Kippur to be chayav kos? No. Rabbi Lezer says it's more. Rabbi Lezer say a big cheekful. So one big cheekful is enough to be chayav kos in Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, according to Beishamai, how much do you have to have a reverse on Yom Kippur to be chayav kos? According to Beishamai, only one cheekful. Now, if you say two cheekfuls, that could be more than this, but one cheekful is less. And we have a principle that always Beishamai or Machli Beisilel or Mekel, except for where? Where's the only cases where Beisilel or Machli? Everywhere Beisilel or Mekel. Where's only there's a certain parak in Idias which has in it all the chumras of Beisilel. And if it's not there, you know that Beisilel being Mekel. For the boy over here comes out of Beisilel being Machli. Here, Beisilel being Machli. Why is being Chumrah? Because they're saying one cheekful. One cheekful is less than the reverse. To be Chav Kos, according to Beisilel, you need to drink less. Omalei, top of Pei on the Beis, Ki Itchel. This question came up. Reverse and one cheekful of Oig Melech HaBoshen is how much? A lot more than the reverse. So therefore, Beishamai in that particular circumstances are kula. Because Beishamai in that particular circumstances are chumrah. Because Beishamai says for Oig Melech HaBoshen, how much does he have to drink? Just the reverse that we have cause. But Beisilel say, no, you have to drink a whole cheekful. The way the Ritvos says it, the Ritvos says like this, that it is true that always Beisilel or Mekel. In this particular case, it is sometimes a kula, sometimes a chumrah. And that's not in the general rule. The rule is that Beisilel can't be more machmir than Beishamai. Here, they're not being more machmir than Beishamai. They're saying a new halacha, which can be a kula, can be a chumrah. So therefore, it's not an idios. The question is why it's not an idios. The answer is because it's not definitely a chumrah. When it comes to eating, every single human being, whether he's a giant like Oig or not the giant, what's the halacha is chayav by a date. This is a very strong question. Mishnah himself in Hilchos Yom Kippur mentions this Gemara. That it's very interesting. When it comes to eating, the measure goes according to a fixed size, a bit less than an egg. So if we said the egg is 50 cc, 45 cc, that's enough to be chayav Yom Kippur. When it comes to drinking, it goes more than one cheekful. So what you should do is, which one himself says that if a person is sure, before Yom Kippur, take a drink, fill up your cheek, spit heads, whether you've got a big mouth or a small mouth. Which will ask the question, which Papa already asks, Zera asks over here, what's the difference? Rabbi is going to say this answer to many questions. And the answer is always that there's Chazal new human biology, what is human needs. That when a person comes to eating, if he doesn't get to eat a whole date, he doesn't get calmed down. So it comes out that every time it comes by food, is up to the human being. It comes up to the food, a specific amount of food. It comes to drink, he first has a different amount to drink. Gets satisfied, means he gets less anguish, less injury. Again, indeed, will not be, will still suffer from hunger, but there will be a calming down for but a small calming down. That means the Torah didn't afflict. Once a person eats a kriseves, he's less afflicted. So therefore, by Oig Melech he's a little bit less afflicted. But everybody else is a lot less afflicted. But this is how Chazal rule. And then God says again, a person on the Yom Kippur is going to eat less kriseves. Eats fatty meat that gives you real satisfaction, right? A piece of good meat, you feel satisfied. The loving fanim is palm fronds. It's branches of a palm tree, which have hardly any taste. It's barely edible. They're very hard to eat. It's like eating, like say, celery. Celery, you don't get satisfied from eating celery or cucumber. How much satisfaction you get from celery? The same piece of cucumber, the same piece of meat, that both is the same issa. And what's the Abaya answer? Less than the kriseves, of course, doesn't feel calm. When he gets to eat meat, calming down a lot. Will only calming down a little bit. So again and again, Abai says this is the reality. that when it comes to calming down, you have to eat a kisevis. Less than that does not make a person feel any better. If a person eats a kisevis of meat, he feels a lot better. A kisevis of cucumber, he'll feel a little bit better. But less than a kisevis, even of meat, he will not feel better. A small piece of meat doesn't do anything to some people. The halacha is that in Yom Kippur you only chayav if you eat a kedei achilas pas. If you eat it only the amount of time it takes to eat a pas. Says the Gemara that it doesn't make sense because kazai said kisev is not the normal shit. We talk about kazai kedei achilas pas. There's a kisev kedei achilas pas. It's two different measurements. And Rabbi says again, more than that, it doesn't. That means if eats a kisevis in a longer than kedei achilas pas, it is no good. So let's just work out the error. Kedei achilas pas is half a bread. Pas literally means half, by the way. Kedei achilas pas means half a loaf. How many eggs in a loaf? 4, very good. 4 eggs in a loaf. 4 eggs in a loaf. So half a loaf has 2 eggs. So on Yom Kippur, you have to work out a kisevis b'kedei achilas pas. Now we said the kisevis is a bit less than an egg. So you have to eat it at about a third of your normal eating rate. Nowadays they say 9 minutes because that's the most when it comes to pace, we say 2 or 4 minutes. Comes to Yom Kippur, we say 9 minutes. You should take a 9-minute break between. But I saw the Chodshani writes that when the possible food or the most satisfying food. Why? Because the Gemara here says it makes a difference as well. For example, he recommends they should drink grape juice. He says grape juice is much more when you're drinking, instead of drinking water, which doesn't give a person so much. A person should drink grape juice because if you're going to be drinking shiurim, at least because the Lord just said that has to be, that makes no difference. Meat and palm fronds is the same measurement. So if you're going to eat less than the kisevis because the person is not well, so you should eat less than the kisevis of meat. Not always does a meat help because it's hard to eat meat, but at least eat something which is satisfying. Maski floor. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Minimum. That's right. No, that's not. Because that's what he's trying to say. He's probably asked this point. It's very good. The Torah says affliction is not to eat more than a certain amount in a certain amount of time. So he's afflicting himself. The fact that he's enjoying it more, let's say he's having toffees or jellies or whatever it may be, that doesn't take away from the affliction. The affliction is what you asked it yesterday. Yes, but that's not Chazal will kivya. What is affliction? It makes no difference now. There's no din on Tisha B'Av. If your children under the age of 12 or 13, or sweets and things like that, you should give them water, rice and fish. Not, you don't serve them. Yom Kippur is different. On Yom Kippur, even if a person has to eat, the person can drink grape juice. No, because Tisha B'Av is Avelus. This Chazal told us how to afflict yourself. There's no reason to afflict yourself, for example, to sit in a cold place, medrash. If you're based on very cold air conditioning, you say, the idea, Chazal will give what is affliction. That is a very important point. Therefore, we should drink grape juice and eat meat or not meat. Those people who eat biscuits or whatever it is that make you feel better. Okay. The halacha is that if a person eats something, he becomes tummy. This is very hard to remember. I must admit, it took me a little to remember. Maybe something to remember. Why, if somebody eats food, does it become tummy? Which is tummy? Let's say this is tummy. Right? Imagine I've got in this cup water, which is tummy. How would this water be tummy, by the way? A shells fell in, or much more simple, it was in the house of a dead body. And I drink it, I become tummy. I have to drink quite a bit. We'll see with food, you have to eat 2 beitzim, you have to eat. 2 beitzim, you have to eat. 2 whole eggs. If I eat 1 egg of tummy, I do not become tummy. Let's for example, at somebody's house, and unfortunately was lifter, and he's got their loaf of bread. If I eat half a slice of bread, I'm not tummy. If I eat a whole slice of bread, I'm tummy. Does anybody remember why? The Gemara says in Shabbos, it was one of the 18 gezeros we do our bonum, because what happens is when a person eats, he often drinks, and we're concerned that if he eats, let's say bread which is tummy, let's bread with a tummy person's house, he'll want to wash it down. If it's a kohen, what would he wash it down with? Wine of truma. The wine of truma will touch the bread in his mouth and make it tummy. So Bob asks the question, why does it have to be a chatzi pras? Why so much? Why by Yom Kippur do we say Kisevus? And why over here is it only a chatzi pras? Since it's only been to our bottom, so therefore we'll make it that only if you eat 2 eggs, you're tummy. If you eat 1 egg, you're not tummy. Says a papa that tumas gvir, which is the tumah becoming tummy when you eat, is devaisa. And what says midu'abonon, it means it's du'abonon for asbachta balno. Here, if you look at the second thesis, the chatzi pras, it's quite a long thesis. I'll just say the outline, a very interesting from the beginning of thesis. Thesis asks the following chap. Maybe you could answer it yourself. Thesis says, why shouldn't you eat tummy food? Why do you become tummy? What do we just say? You wash it down with wine of tumah. And the wine of tumah becomes tummy from food. This is like this. How much food requires to spread tumah? Somebody should remember. To spread tumah? Kibetza, we said this a few times. To become tummy by eating tummy food, you need to eat 2 kibetza. I understand the logic. If the reason that you come tummy is we are concerned that you'll spread the tumah by chewing it and thing, that if you eat 1 egg of tumah, you'll wash it down with wine. If you eat only half an egg of tumah, so this I can understand you're not going to make the wine tummy, because even if you drink wine of tumah, who cares? It's not going to be it doesn't spread tumah. But why do you have to eat 2 eggs of tumah? 2 eggs of tumah to become tummy? Answers to this is because if you eat less than 1 kibetza, you don't need to wash it down. It's only when you eat a lot you need to wash things down. So therefore, it is true that if indeed somebody has an egg of tumah in his mouth and he washes it down with tumah, the tumah will become tummy, because we said that tumah spreads by kibetza. But in order to make a gezerah that the person should become tummy, in order that he should keep away from tumah, that's why we make the person tummy. That requires that he should eat 2 kibetza. I want to give it back. If a person eats meat and salt with stuff, that means, let's say you ate less than a keseves of meat, but because they added salt to it, now it's a whole keseves, then it's chayav kos. Even though eating salt in the zone is not good eating, this is how people eat it with stuff. So if a person eats a bowl of salt on Yom Kippur, is he chayav kos? No. He's not chayav kos. Why? Because that's not eating. But if he eats meat with a spoonful of salt of it, it's chayav kos. Okay. Omar Ishlokish, sil shagabe yerek, juice on a vegetable, it's obvious. It's obvious. At the end of the day, people have juice, etc. It's vegetables. It's a drink. And a drink is a different measure to kisevas. And therefore, if a person has a bit of vegetable, let's say, which is in a dip or something, you should say half is food, half is drink. Anything which is part of the food is food, and therefore a person is chayav kos. Person who eats achila gasa means he stuffs himself in Yom Kippur. Is potter. How is that possible? How is it possible to stuff yourself? No, because by Yom Kippur morning you're starving. It means that he eats immediately after the Sudam of seconds. And let's say half an hour after Sudam of seconds, he's stuffed to the gills, and then he starts eating. He's not chayav kos, because by the morning it's not possible to eat achila gasa. Because by the morning is the first bit that he eats is hungry. But he eats half an hour after achila gasa his part. Why? He's not he's suffering. He's suffering from the eating. So therefore he's still afflicted. Now we had a thesis of Pesachim, one of the most famous thesis in Adei Pesachim, which discusses what does it mean achila gasa. Does anybody remember this thesis? No. Right. A second, we'll just see. A second, try to get the clear thesis clear. Okay. Thesis is mechadash that there are 2 levels of achila gasa, and this is brought down in halacha very lot. There's 2 kinds of achila gasa. Good English for achila gasa, really got it? Stuffing yourself. Overeating. Okay. There's two levels of overeating. One, when the person gets no pleasure. For example, you've eaten a whole meal, eating and no pleasure. Another, where you suffer, where it's actually unpleasant. Tosis is in the Chadash that when we say that you're not chayav for eating when you're overeating, it's only if it's unpleasant. Not that you're not enjoying yourself. Not enjoying yourself doesn't make you achila gasa. It has to be that it's actually painful. Now, this comes up in many halachas because this comes up in other things. And I saw Rashi points out that he looked at this Rashi, and let's see the words Rashi, achila gasa. It's the second wide line by me. I ate the night of Yom Kippur, that means just after Kol Nidrei, when he's still full. Says the Rashi that he thinks, he writes very strong, that Rashi does not agree with Tosis. And the Rashi holds that what? Very good. As long as you're not enjoying yourself, it's achila gasa and your potter in Yom Kippur. Can you imagine such a chiddush? It's a very big chiddush. Tosis disagree. It comes out because Tosis says, for example, why does Tosis come in there? The halacha is that you're not supposed to eat matzah on their Pesach. You're not supposed to eat anything on their Pesach. It should be achila gasa. Tosis, I understand what kind of achila gasa is going to be if you eat. You stop eating from mincha ketana, right? So you stop eating hours and hours and hours. So Tosis, why achila gasa? Says Tosis there, we try to much. Tosis split overeating to two categories. Says Rashi from this Rashi argues on Tosis. It comes out after Kamina. If a person eats an hour after Yom Kippur comes in and he's not enjoying it, but he's not suffering, according to Rashi, he's part from kos. According to Tosis, he's chayav kos because he's not suffering. If you eat a soul eats tuma, achila gas and shabbos sakem and shabbos chimish and eats ken or chimish. The halacha is that if you take tuma and you eat it, you pay 1 1/5, which is nowadays is 1 1/4, 25%. If you damage tuma, let's say I take some of this tuma and I throw it in the sea, I only pay like damages as once. If you eat achila gasa, you don't pay chimish. Why? Not if somebody damages. And that's called damaging, it's not called eating. Person chews barley of tuma, where it's not normal way of eating it because it's raw. If he swallows a plum of tuma, then he sicks it up. Then the second person eats it. Because it's no longer considered the food, it's considered just a material, and therefore you only pay the care and not care and the chimj. I'd very much like to get to the Mishnah because it's quite a long daf. If you eat and drink, it's not mitzvah. So if you eat one biscuit and half a cup of water, less than the thing, it's not mitzvah. Even though the two together could come to acceptance. It says, this is a very interesting kal of Rabbi Yishua. There are different things which are tomei. Some of them are different shiurim and some of them different levels of tumah. Let's give an example. A sheretz, how big does a sheretz have to be to be metame? Tiny, kadosha, like a lentil, very good. How much does, for example, a nevela have to be to be metame? A kazayas, much bigger. That's different sizes of tumah. You've got different levels of tumah. A dead body is metame before a week. A dead sheretz is only metame before a day. Says Rabbi Yeshua, in order for two different things to be mitzvah and tumah, they have to be equal in both. They have to both be equal in normal size. For example, if I take a size of one shell, half a lentil of one shell and half a lentil of another shell, the two together are mitame. Why? They're both level of tumah, they make me tumah for one day, and they both have the level of shells of the thing. If I take a tiny bit of a shell and a tiny bit of a gazais and the vela, and I put them together, it will not be mitzvah. Because even though they both make me tummy for one day, but they're not making mitame the same shiur. To be mitame, you have to have both equal. If the tumah in the size, that means the level of tumah, and the size of tumah is mitzvah. Shiur, the level of tumah, for example, one day or a week, or shiur the size without the tumah, or lo tumasa v'lo shiur, or neither, a mitzvah. Says the Gemara that there, Rabbi Shua is arguing the Tanakh. Tanakh says you don't need the two together. In our Mishnah, it says the food and drink is not mitzvah. Why they're not mitzvah? Because one is a kiseves and one is mole lugbob. So you see, like Rabbi Yeshua, that when two things have two different measures, you can't add the two together. Says the Gemara of the Achmed Omar Frutim Rabbanon. Ask Rabbi Rabbanon also in Tumah the Shem Tumah Chati. They hold we don't care as long as it's all tomatoes with stuff. Avloch v'shvisu v'daitahu. The high lemmy yas v'date eating a little bit and drinking a bit does make a person calm. Bechinam avishok shvachlukas shnir v'abishua detak kalam avishah chulu v'abichinam afritim rabbanon. Ad kalek rabbanon also in Tumah. Avloch v'shvisu v'daitahu v'alek v'asedate. That means that both Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Nachman said the same answer, which is very straightforward. Regarding Tumah, the Chachamim say if something is tumah, that's something. Join them together. Who cares? But when it comes to Yishuv Das, make a person feel better, it's not to do with the fact that one thing is everyone's was. It's not because they're different shum. It simply does make a person feel better. A person is just as much in pain, and therefore it's not mitzvah. And therefore everybody agrees that if a person eats a little bit and drinks a little bit, it's not mitzvah. And that's why, again, Chut Shani writes, those who are allowed to eat in Yom Kippur are allowed to every 9 minutes have a sip plus some food. They don't have to wait 9 minutes for food 9 minutes because it's not mitzvah. You don't have to worry about the two being mitzvah. Okay, so we're up to the Mishnah. Thursday. Mr. Shem, we have to start